Hi, time travelers. It's Miss Glenn again. Remember I told you when we were reading the story and talking about Palm Sunday that was the beginning of what we call Holy Week, the week in between Palm Sunday and Easter Sunday. Now there was a lot that happened that week, but there's two things that I think and we all think are very important, and we want to talk to you about them. One is called the Last Supper. This happened on Thursday of that week, and sometimes we call it Maundy Thursday. It's kind of a big word, but that's what we call it sometimes. But just so that you know, the Last Supper is the story that we're going to read about today. It talks about something that you're very, very familiar with. It talks about basically Jesus serving his disciples, serving his friends, but also the very first communion. So we're going to talk about the Last Supper, and then I'm going to go right into all of the activities that happened on Good Friday, okay? The Last Supper. Jesus knew that the time had come for him to leave this world. He wanted to share his last Passover meal together with his 12 closest friends. Remember, we call them the disciples. Jesus loved his friends and wanted to show them his love in a very caring way. As his friends got ready for the meal, Jesus put water in a large bowl and knelt down on the floor. He wanted to wash the feet of each disciple. When it was Peter's turn, that was one of his very best friends, Peter said to Jesus, "Oh, you're never going to wash my feet." And Jesus replied, "Peter, you don't understand what I'm doing now, but you will later." Peter loved Jesus so much that he said, "Then don't just wash my feet, but my head and my hands too." Peter wanted to be as close to Jesus as possible. Okay, let's stop right there. What if, let's say we're in church, and Pastor, who we love and respect so much in his amazing robe, comes and says, "I want to wash your feet." I think I'd be freaking out just a little bit. Freaking out, just like Peter was. But here again, like we talked before about faith, Peter had to put his faith in Jesus to know that Jesus was trying to tell him something. Jesus was trying to show him something that he needed to see. So Peter, even though he wasn't quite sure what was going on, he said okay. And he ended up washing the feet of all of his disciples. Now, some of you guys may remember when you've gone to church on that Holy Thursday, that Maundy Thursday, here at First Lutheran, we have done washing of hands and washing of feet, where our church leaders wash the hands and feet of people that come in worship. It is serving. It's a sign of love and service. And remember that it all started with Jesus, and it all started at the Last Supper. As they were eating, Jesus sadly told his disciples, "Soon, one of you will betray me. One of you will tell people who don't like me where I am, so they can take me away." Ugh. Okay, that's a hard thing to hear, and that was a hard thing for him to say. These are the people that are the closest in the whole world to him. But he knew one of them was going to betray him. Well, this upset the disciples. You can imagine. I'd be all upset. And each one said, "It's not me you're talking about, is it? It's not me. It can't be me." But when Judas said this, Jesus gently replied, "Yes, Judas, you will betray me." Oh, that's a hard message to hear, isn't it? Then Jesus picked up a loaf of bread. Okay, what is this starting to sound like, guys? Loaf of bread. He blessed it, and he gave some to each of his friends, saying, "Take this bread and eat it. This is my body." Then Jesus picked up a cup of wine, He gave thanks and said, "Drink this. It is my blood, which I must give up, so the sins of people may be forgiven." Okay, does that sound familiar? Does that sound like what we do every single week? You hear pastors say those words, guys. This was the first time. This was the first communion. And as you all get older, you will have your first communion. You will have the instruction, so you'll understand how important it is. And talk to your parents about it. Talk to them about communion. But this was the first time, the Last Supper, the first time ever we did communion. Now, when the meal was over, Jesus and his friends went to a place called the Mount of Olives. Jesus said sadly, "Soon you will all leave me." Peter felt bad. "Even if all the others leave you, I won't." Jesus looked at his dear friend and said quietly, "Before the sun rises, you will pretend that you don't even know me, and you'll do it 3 times. Peter said, "Jesus, I love you too much to ever do that." And all of the disciples said the same thing. Well, I'm here to tell you, when you are listening to the services, you're going to find out, or when you're reading your Bible, that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. Just like he said, Judas betrayed him, and Peter 3 times that very night, Peter, who loved him more than life itself, denied that he even knew him. It was out of fear. And of course, he felt terrible about it. But Jesus knew it was coming. So guys, I'm going to go right into now the story about that Friday of Holy Week. Now, we call it Good Friday. And to be honest, even as an adult, it's a little confusing, this label of Good Friday. It's a tough day, guys. It's the day Jesus died. Ugh. But we know why he died. He died for us. Okay? But in Holy Week, it's called Good Friday, all right? So we're going to read that story right now. It was a very sad day when Jesus died. The soldiers who had arrested him teased him for pretending to be a king. Remember, he was arrested like a criminal, like he had done something wrong. Imagine how his friends and the people that loved him, imagine how they felt about that. He had done nothing wrong. Well, he was arrested, and the soldiers that arrested him made sure to tease him because he was a king, not the king that they were expecting, but they still found reason to tease him. They took his clothes, and they put a king's purple cloak on him. They made him a crown of vines with sharp thorns and put it on his head. A crown of thorns? Are you kidding me? Of course that's going to hurt. And they put it right on his head because he was a king. The soldiers made Jesus carry the heavy wooden cross. The cross that we see that he was crucified on. We've seen that cross. This wasn't a light branch. This was a heavy wooden cross. They knew they were going to crucify him, and to make matters worse, he had to carry the cross that he would be on. The cross was too heavy for him. He fell. He skinned his knees, and the cross tumbled to the ground. A man in the crowd carried the cross the rest of the way. Let's talk about time traveling for just a second, guys. If you could go back to Good Friday and this horrible time where the soldiers were doing horrible things to Jesus, who you loved so much, would you jump out and offer to help him carry the cross? It would take a lot of bravery. Would you be a little afraid that the soldiers were fixing to get you and arrest you too? These are tough questions, guys, but I think it would break your heart to see Jesus suffering that much. The soldiers nailed Jesus' hands and feet to the cross. Guys, nailed it. You know what a nail is. Even if you've never built a house, you know what a nail is, right? We don't think about putting nails through our hands and through our feet, but that's what they did. They raised Jesus' cross up on a hill between two other men. The other men were thieves, and they were both being crucified too. One of the men was angry with Jesus. If you're such a powerful king, can't you just save yourself and go ahead and save us too? The man spat at Jesus. But the other man believed in Jesus, and he shouted back, "Don't you know who this is? This is God's son. He hasn't done anything wrong. We are being punished for our mistakes, but Jesus shouldn't be here." Guys, there were 3 people up on crosses. 2 of them were being punished for crimes that they committed, and one of them was Jesus. What had he done? Nothing. Nothing but preach the word of the Lord. The man turned to Jesus and asked, "Will you take me to heaven with you?" Jesus looked at the man and loved him, because he loved everybody. He even loved the guy that was being ugly to him, by the way. But Jesus looked at the man and said, "Yes, today we will be in heaven together." So even at that moment, they have made him carry his own cross. They've nailed him to the cross, and everybody's being mean to him. And even in that moment, he found the grace and mercy to make sure that other person knew that he was going to be in heaven with him. After a while, the world grew very dark, as if a terrible thunderstorm was coming. It was as if all of creation was crying because Jesus was about to die. Jesus was feeling all alone and prayed to see if God was still there. Do you think he was? Of course. God never left Jesus. God was with him the whole time. Jesus looked at the crowd. He was so sad that people didn't believe that he was God's son. He asked God to forgive them for killing him. He asked God to forgive them for killing him as he was on the cross. Let that be something that you remember when you are struggling to forgive somebody, okay? If Jesus could forgive people during this dark time, surely we can find it in our hearts to forgive people for lesser things, right? The soldiers offered him some sour wine, but he didn't want to drink it. He was ready to die. Finally, Jesus had fought for long enough, and he said, "God, the work you gave me to do here is finished." He breathed a final, long, slow breath, and then he died. Now, I know that is a super sad story, but Jesus knew that that is why God sent him to earth. He died for the forgiveness of our sins. Jesus knew. He knew this was coming, and he had faith. But remember, as sad as Good Friday is, it's leading us into this amazing time of Holy Saturday and Easter Sunday, where we go from being so sad to celebrating this amazing miracle of the resurrection. So don't be too sad, because the news is about to get better. I swear it's going to get better. So take another look at your lesson. Make sure you finished everything in lesson 10. And the next lesson, which will include a whole lot of celebration, is coming next. Thanks again. Bye.